So protecting your data in this era is priority number one for organizations. Sunil James, the Senior Director at HP, is here to talk about the role of security in the enterprise. Sunil, welcome from a beautiful place, I see.
Thank you, Ronald. Thanks for taking the time to hear our story. And yes, I'm in a beautiful place. I'm in my home, like a lot of other families these days. So it's nice to have the luxury of a backyard and the weather as well. But
Very
thanks
nice.
for having me be here.
Yeah, and if we talk about data protection, it's number one priority right now on the IT priority list, and the importance has even risen with this pandemic. Can you explain the type of security threats that organizations are facing, and why should organizations be proactive in protecting their data?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. It's a timely question as well, Ronald. I think one of the things that's interesting right now, right, this year with events like COVID, have precipitated a large change in terms of how enterprises think about taking advantage of distributed models, distributed labor forces, distributed architectures, interdependencies between the technologies and their own people versus the technologies and partners that they work with. It's forcing all of us to rethink how do we continue to deliver value to our end customers when we don't necessarily have the same types of working models like we've had for a very, very long period of time. This change, at least on the IT side, has happened in the last 15 years or so, right? The advent of cloud computing, public cloud computing with the likes of Amazon Web Services and Azure and Google Cloud and others has created an opportunity and an economic environment to allow for you to have different types of architectures that take advantage of flexible resources on a pay-as-you-go basis, right? The consumption-based model as opposed to a CapEx-oriented model. And I think that when you think about the fact that events like this are accelerating the adoption of more dynamic computing architectures, what that's also doing is it's putting into risk a lot more knowledge and information about your customers, about your business than ever before. Because this data is no longer going to just sit behind a firewall in a data center that you have made extremely secure through whatever controls you've had over the last 5 years, 10 years. That data is going to move. The data is going to sit in a storage object in a public cloud provider. It's going to sit on a device in an edge location. It's going to move around across as it needs to be able to be processed and to be analyzed to answer questions relevant to your business. And so when we think about this risk, this idea of data security, I think, is about to undergo a massive revolution in terms of the capabilities and technologies and focus that enterprises are going to be spending on this in a way that we probably have never seen before.
And you talk about capabilities and the technologies for security. I want to talk about AI. AI contributes substantially to the security and to the safety of organizations right now. Can you share some insights or examples how AI supports protecting organizations?
Yeah, so I mean, artificial intelligence as a concept is a developing concept. It's in many people's minds been around for a long time, but it is very nascent in terms of where the models are, where the thinking is around the utility and applicability of artificial intelligence into different domains of problem solving. Security is one, and I think a lot of times the value that comes from capabilities like machine learning, like artificial intelligence, is the ability to be able to consume, process, and be able to discern from that data set interesting signal from noise that can help you identify anomalies, right? Anomaly detection as a security concept has been around for a very, very long time. It's been applied in different areas, whether it's network security, whether it's looking at intrusion detection, archives and logs, whether it's access patterns of employees, accessing repositories of information, a variety of ways in which we can have or have historically seen machine learning models as a precursor to artificial intelligence be able to deliver value there. That capability set is going to become all the more important because of what I said beforehand, right? This adoption and evolution towards larger scale architectures are going to allow for enterprises to be able to instantiate computational workloads for minutes at thousands of iterations a second if they want to on any given cloud provider, public and or private. And it's going to generate a large amount of information in terms of who it's accessing, what resources it's serving, where is the knowledge and information associated with the computational resources coming from and going to. That's all signal. And it is going to be impossible for security operations teams, security engineering teams, staffed manually, to be able to manually process that. It's just not going to happen. And so we're going to need to have mechanisms that can allow for us to not only pre-process and identify signal on a continuous basis, but then prompt humans to be able to take action. Artificial intelligence is also proposing the capabilities of maybe taking the first couple of steps in the concept of preventing an attack from happening. If, for example, we can identify automated malicious malware rootkits that have found their way embedded on some sort of a device or a USB that's been brought into an organization, and then being able to identify that malicious device that's been attached to a computer within the seconds that it's been identified before it does its activity, that might be an application of artificial intelligence where you can quarantine that USB device on the device, on the laptop itself, the network segment, so that you can flag a human being to come in and do a deeper introspection as well. I think we're at the very beginnings of seeing where that applicability is. But one thing that's interesting around the world of artificial intelligence, around this domain of security, is that I think many organizations are enamored by the promise of stopping, but they have to weigh that against the false positives, right? Of what could adversely impact business operations. Turning something off, removing access has the potential impact to impact your customer operations and your business operations. And so I think many organizations are saying, let me watch, let me evolve, let me study, let me test this out and see how it's going to work before I really run it in a production environment. So I think there's a lot more thinking to be had here.
Yeah, and then next to the technology to better protect your company's data, you also need experts within your organization. But what we see now is that there's 3 million vacancies for security experts. How can organizations still weapon themselves with this shortage of people in the market?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We have a massive shortage in technology resources in general, and security, I think, is one domain here. There's a number of things that I think we can be looking at increasingly over time. Some of it comes down to being able to provide. I use this analogy when in previous jobs, right? I think organizations are utilizing and taking advantage of building blocks, right? You're familiar with, kids' Lego pieces, right? That you can piece together to create the solution to whatever it is you want to design. I think software is going that way, right? I think there's going to be more of a need to be able to have a better understanding about how these Lego pieces interconnect, where the security risks are when you connect these things together, and then to be able to automatically flag and identify those risks before they find themselves in a production environment, right? So when we talk about security labor forces, there's labor forces that can be used on the front end side of application development to identify risky design patterns, risky choice of open source software, risky choice of partner APIs and third-party APIs embedded within your applications that can get ahead of the problem. But let's assume that you've done that well or not. Let's assume that you've got things running in production and you've got operational issues that are showing up. The challenge there is to the conversation we just had before, being able to identify production operational issues or susceptible or potential operational and susceptible security issues that we need to be able to monitor and look out for. The idea of security operations centers and network operations centers staffed 24/7 with people who are trained to understand and look through the signal, I think is very, very small. It's going to get smaller and smaller, especially as we see down market adoption of some of these as a service security capabilities. We've seen managed security offerings go from very, very large Fortune 1000 operations to mid-market and lower end market customer bases, regardless of verticals, where I think the value in terms of having a human be involved to watch out for operational issues is going to be challenged for the point you just raised. And so in those situations, I think you're going to see an evolution of the managed security narrative move towards more automation to pre-process, right? Building on the theme from earlier in this conversation, so that you don't need to have as many people in your organization as you might have historically.
Sunil, great stories. I love them. Thank you for participating and being in our show. And for the audience, thank you for watching, and we see you next time.